Hello, welcome back to the ministry. The Lord gave me this while I was sitting. I'm going to have a transparent moment right here. And I'm going to talk about this. And this is my transparency. I've been walking with God for a long time. Even I did leave him for a period. And it's not that I left, it's just that I wasn't in my prayer place. And I had never been in the prayer posture that I started to be in about 9.5 years ago. Until 9.5 years ago. But I knew how to pray. I've been walking. I just was not devoted to God like that at the time. So when I gave my life to God and then gave my relationship status to God, I let him have it. And I went through certain tests and trials in the process. I didn't really date. I didn't really do all that. But the Lord brought certain tests to prepare me throughout. I allowed certain men to be around me, so on and so forth. I had my time frame in that. But I never really dated any of those people, meaning they were around me. I'm the type of person, I'm going to be honest with you. You could be around me, and if I'm not into you, I ain't paying you no attention. You could be sitting right next to me. I ain't into you, I ain't paying you no attention. You could be smiling me right in the face. I'm like, I ain't into you, I ain't paying you attention. That's just who I am. But when the Lord brought to me the revelation of kingdom marriage, and I sat down with the Lord and I wrote out my list of what it was that I wanted in a relationship with the person that I wanted to come into my life. And I put down the bullet points of what I desired. And I placed it before the Lord. And I let it go. Sometimes I would take those walks around the reservoir and I would talk to the Lord about the qualities of that man and all that kind of stuff. But I always told the Lord, I don't care what complexion they are, if they're African, they're Indian, they're this, they're Asian, they're this, they're white, they're this. I didn't care. I didn't care at the time. And I let it go. But I remember that night, I was sitting on my bed and I cried out to the Lord about the treatment that I was experiencing at the time in the personal relationships that I had, and the fact that I had nobody other than God at the time to confide in. The people around me were hurting me. The people around me were causing me pain emotionally. And I cried out to God. I cried out to God. And I said to God, I want the person that the Lord is sending to me. And God had me start to get into a prayer posture. And then when the Lord revealed it to me, I've already told this part, I started to pray. And I will always say this, hear me with your ears, hear me with your ears, hear me with your ears. I never started praying for the individual first. I started to pray for my husband, and the individual was shown to me. Let me repeat that. I did not start to pray for the individual first. I started to pray for my husband, and the individual kept popping in front of me. Over and 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 over. And I was like, God, for real? because the status of the individual seemed way out there for me. Why am I saying this? Because I'm about to be a little bit more transparent. When you start to pray, you have the realization, especially something I've learned over the past few years, is that when you pray, and I mean for real prayers, I'm not talking about praying on somebody, P-R-E-Y. When you pray on somebody, get this clear, that if you're praying on somebody, you are praying for your will to be done in their life. But if you're praying for somebody, you're praying for the Lord's will to be done in their life, even if you don't ever see it. Go back to my word. I just did two different versions of forgiveness. And then I believe I called it Matthew 7. Because I always pray. That's my surrender of the situation. That whatever God's going to do, let him do it and let him be in control of it. Let his will, meaning what is will? Mind, will, and emotions. What does the enemy fight? He fights your mind, will, and emotions by trying to get you to go into rebellion and operate in sin. This is usually what the people that are praying P-R-E-Y on people, they operate in rebellion. But the people that are praying for a person, praying for God's will. Because that means you're praying God's will into their life. If you don't ever see it, you don't have to see them. You don't have to see it. But I will always remember laying something on the altar in relation to my God-ordained spouse in church when I was still in New York. And I remember saying to the Lord, that was the first time I had ever said, I pray that you bless this man, even if I never end up with him. A lot of people would never say that. But what ends up happening is this. When you start to think about the fact that maybe there was a counterfeit in their life, maybe there was a person that was there, especially when a lot of people start to bring up the fact, it's one thing when the person is operating in witchcraft and they're trying to destroy that person. It's another thing when that person was just there and it just so happens that your God-ordained spouse chose the wrong person. That's just another human being. And their desire is they want them. Because he did. I don't even like saying that the devil did that. But he did, in a way. He allowed that person to come into that space and desperately desire to hold that person in place. How do I know? I was in a relationship before myself. I remember when our relationship was ending and I wanted to hold on to that thing for dear life. Knew it was over and try to hold on to it. That's what happens. You know it's ending. You know you can't keep it. But there's a level of guilt that you're like, if I hold on to it, maybe the person is already out the door. Even if they physically haven't done it yet. God, why you got me here? Some of us, why am I saying this? Some of us, our God-ordained spouses are going to come to us almost right out of our relationship. And to us, that might be like, isn't that too soon? Isn't it? You only been out of the relationship 3 months, 6 months, so on and so forth. So period. Because we think about how we think of emotions. That we're like, I couldn't get in a relationship after 3 to 6 months. But you have to think about the way a man's mind works. Somebody showed this to me. Had to been almost 10 years ago. And they were making the point that a man cheats 25 to 36 times before he actually does it. What? Man cheats? What are we talking about, cheat? I need you to follow what I'm about to say. It is 25 to 36 steps that lead to that action. Meaning the action doesn't have to be taken before they are inactively pursuing it. Are you following me? Some of your God-ordained spouses, the Lord started to yank their chain. And it's not that they were cheating on the counterfeit. It's the fact that the Lord started to put them in a place of a sequence of steps to step out of that relationship they were already in. Remember, I said 25 to 36. It starts in a thought. It starts in a series of a pattern of things. It starts in a notion. It starts in the thinking. It starts in the conversating. It starts. But see, what most people do, they be still in that other relationship, and then they start talking to the other person, dating the other person, doing all of this. But God did that in the spirit realm. God opened those doors in the spirit realm. God had you spiritually communicating with each other in the spirit realm. God opened that stuff up in the spirit realm. You weren't physically doing it. But even the word says, as a man thinketh, so is he. So if a man is thinking of it, he already out the relationship that he was in physically. I literally heard a coach on relationships say this. That a man, when he's in a relationship, when he sees that he no longer wants to be in it, he's not going to leave it in me. He's not going to say, I'm done with this. What he will do is he will start to make steps and preparations that he will slowly ease his way out the door. But he has made the decision to go. That might take a year for him to walk out the door, though. It might take 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. You know those men that just stay in a relationship because they loyal to the person, but they emotionally are no longer there. Some of y'all know that your grandparents was like that. Your parents was like that. You watch them emotionally not be attached to each other at all. They just didn't leave the house from each other. I was listening to the Tamia song, came on the radio the other day, and it was talking about the stranger in my house. It's talking about two people being in a relationship that they ain't there no more. And some of us have been feeling guilty because we're like, oh my God, this person is coming out of a relationship and they're going to come into a relationship with me. God, are you sure? God, are you sure? And God will give you consistent revelations. I'm doing this. I'm doing this. Because some of us, I'm going to be honest with you. I get that guilt trip thing about me every once in a while that I'd be like, was they in a relationship? Because I actually don't know. I don't know. My person is not forthcoming with these kinds of pieces of information. I don't know. But the type of things I've been hearing in the spirit has been saying that there was, and it may have been, a lot of things going on over there. But when I tell you, when a person makes their mind up, year, 2 years, 18 months, you might see them in that 6 months, but they've been spiritually out of the relationship they were in for 2 years. They just walked out of it 6 months ago. Their feet walked out of it 6 months ago. This is how a man who will be in a relationship with a woman for 5, 6, 10, 15 years will walk out of a relationship with that person, meet a person, and within 6 months they married. Or less. I'm going to peep you another piece of information. When I was in my previous relationship, remember the person I told you that I held on to for a long period of time? We broke up. 2 weeks later, I asked him to drive me somewhere. And he tried to not tell me that he was in a new relationship. But I knew because he had been in a relationship with that person for 3 months before we broke up. What am I trying to tell you? I'm saying that when a man makes the decision that he's out, he's out. So when he walks out of the relationship, some of you, I've been hearing a lot of these prophetic voices say, oh, they're going to come to you immediately. They're going to come to you really shortly after the last relationship ends. They're going to come to you. They're going to come to you. Don't feel guilty because they took the time while in the relationship to emotionally get out of it. Where we normally just get out the relationship and take 2.5 years before we do. Or take the 7 years that we were in it to get ourselves together. Or take, you understand what I'm saying? That's what we do. A man will sit in the relationship for 6.5 years and be in a new relationship 6 months after that relationship ended. Men don't work like we do. They was gone a long time before they walked away from the relationship. Their loyalty, their what have you, caused them to stay. You may have seen it as that person was in that relationship. They wasn't in that relationship no more. I've seen it with my parents. I saw 2 people sit in a house together that weren't in a relationship. My dad was not with my mother. They just lived in the same space. Some of these men were in relationships much like that. They were doing the steps that it was assumed that they should do, but they emotionally are no longer there. And the Lord knew that. So he was breaking it up. It wasn't you. All you did was pray God's will, and it made it easier for them to walk away from it. Because I always prayed for that other person that was in that person's life. I've always prayed. There were times that I would pray. I was like, God, please let me know, because I will release this thing. I remember hearing Megan Michelle say this one time. She said, if you will just tell me that this is the right thing, I'll let it go. And then God be like, keep putting their name in front of you like, oh my God. because we